Could I just open this session by again expressing our grateful thanks to Robert Francis QC for addressing us this morning and allowing us to discuss with him the content of his report. Many of our items this morning actually build upon the discussions we've had already, including the next one, which is a paper on patient... Oh, sorry, before I go on to that, may I just check that everybody's happy with the minutes of the last meeting? You are, right.
Yes, very good.
Okay, so let's accelerate into the patient voice. I'm going to invite Tim Kelsey to introduce his paper. Tim?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So, I mean, almost perfectly following on, really, from what Robert was discussing earlier, you know, it's fundamental to the mission of the Commissioning Board that it is actively and in real time analysing and reflecting on what patients and the public are telling us about both services they're receiving, but also more broadly what their issues with health and care actually are. So what we have here is a proposal which will go live from April of a service which will support us and will also be publicly available, which does two things. It first of all reflects on what patients and public are telling us about, patients, carers and others in the public are telling us about services they're receiving, and what the conversation is that's taking place about health and care more generally. So without taking you through the slides which you have in your packs, I mean, essentially, just to take you to one page, if perhaps you could turn to the page on what patients are telling us about health and care, which is 5 slides in. What you have there, just to give you a sense of the kinds of data that we'll be presenting, are really three dimensions of insight. And this will develop, of course, quickly over time and as further data becomes available. But the first component of that insight is what are people individually telling us about the service they're receiving, feedback. And we will harvest that feedback from things like the online feedback that NHS Choices is receiving through the new 111 service, where we want to encourage the general population and patients in particular to tell us more about the services and issues or other comments on the nature of the service they're receiving. And underneath that graphic illustration of the kinds of data we'll be presenting, you then have what's known as a Wordle, which is an attempt to kind of take from unstructured, non-statistical data meaning. And in this case, you can see those words are being emphasized by their size in relation to the volume of comment that's being received. So this is a technique which is very commonly used in visualizing data, but just to give you a sense of what we're talking about. The second kind of dimension of voice is around complaints. We have not made anything like enough use of complaints data that we have in the system. We're going to go from annual accounting for complaints to monthly very quickly, and then actually we're going to aim to get that to daily as fast as possible, certainly during the course of this next financial year. And then the third component dimension of this voice that we're urgently trying to listen to is in relation to what David mentioned earlier, the friends and family test. I should emphasize, by the way, that the idea that we would ask patients and staff for something as simple as would they recommend this service to their friends and family is a very well-tested tool of insight in many other industries, and I'm more than confident that it'll work in this context too. We've had a big pilot running in Midlands and East for a while now, which has demonstrated, as David said, a very direct connection between the act of listening using this tool and the direction of improvement in care that's delivered. So that's really just to give you a sense of what we're producing. I think it will genuinely transform the kind of conversation we have at these meetings, but I'm also I hope very much that it'll also help transform the conversations that everybody else in the service is also having. So this is what we will start from April.
Thank you. Let me invite comments from members of the board. Moira Gibb.
A question, Malcolm, really, that Tim has talked about health and care, and of course it doesn't include social care, and we know that the public find it difficult to understand. We haven't explained it very well, where the gaps are, where the joins up are between social care and health care. So it's just, this is purely NHS data that will be presented. It won't cover lots of aspects that people will be concerned about, and just making sure that we are clear about that. But is there a more developmental question is really, is there a prospect of making this include social care?
Yeah, so I mean, the idea is absolutely that it does that. We are starting where we're starting, which is with hospital trusts, primary care practices, specialised services. So it is NHS. But as you can see in the final slide, we've got a variety of developmental priorities: mental health, other services, community-based services, and I'll bring back to this board a more detailed account of how we are going to move to a much more seamless method of harvesting insight across the whole care context in which people find themselves.
Ian.
So I think this is potentially extremely powerful and very welcome stream of information to help this board with its deliberations and understanding what's going on. Clearly, we're also absolutely committed through your work, Tim, to making sure that the information is publicly available and transparent, as well as to inform our internal deliberations, important though that is. Could you give us a sense of how we then take this stream and use it beyond the point of informing the board as part of our move towards transparency?
Well, I'm hoping that in our conversations about our own business plan, for example, that we will start to use these indicators, these data feeds, as things against which we will want ourselves to be measured. So I'm very much hoping that the success of the NHS as a whole will be measured not just on clinical outcomes, clearly that's vital, but actually also on whether or not people feel they are receiving a high quality service. And these will be the data feeds that will service our own requirement to be held properly to account for what we're doing. So I think this is, in a sense, we will need to determine which of these metrics, and whether there are others that we will gradually develop, we will want to use as our own yardsticks, but I believe this is the raw material, as it were, that will support our own accountability.
Yeah. I think if you think about the people who work for the Commissioning Board, I think obviously them using it is going to be a really important. If you think on a day-to-day basis, our own people will be talking to CCG, specialised commissioners, primary care, so all of that. And if this is the nature of our discourse, we're saying these things are really important, and in those conversations we'll reflect that in there. So that's quite a powerful way of getting a whole system to think and talk about these things in that way.
I have Victor and Bill and Jane and Bruce.
I think this is a really powerful intervention in terms of changing the conversation within the system. I guess I just wanted to ask Tim about how he felt it went beyond the iPad generation. I'm privileged enough to have one, but I just wonder where the lead-in to, my mum who hasn't got one is, and how we might use this information beyond the iPad generation.
Well, critical. First of all, it'll be available in multiple formats, and obviously available for people to print out, for the local GP to print out. For it'll be available on a whole range of different platforms, and not just on the iPad. I mean, I don't know whether you are, but I'm not sure I'm part of the iPad generation either, to be honest. But the importance is really about mobility. So the point of saying it's an iPad is not a gimmick. It's not gimmickry. It's the fact that for the first time we will be able to produce mobile data flows, which people, anyone who cares, the nation, will be able to engage in the conversation. Will be able to use as part of the conversation. So it's about mobility of information, but certainly not to the exclusion of normal multi-channel approaches to enabling people to access it.
Bill.
Thanks, Malcolm. I too think it's very powerful and very welcome. I'd make the link to Everyone Counts, the planning guidance we put out just before Christmas, which talked about the importance of the health and wellbeing partners, the housing directors, the care directors, as well as ourselves and clinical commissioners locally, in taking forward their planning, really understanding and listening to the voice of patients and local communities to understand what matters most, and making sure they're reaching out to the disadvantaged groups, those who are less prominent in expressing their voice. And I think it's just the start, but you could see this as an important piece of development which could make those conversations very real.
I'll reiterate people's comments about how valuable and useful this will be, but I think I'd go one stage further, and that is it's very well being open, transparent, and having the information, having the data, but we need to be able to demonstrate what we've done with it. And I think the combination of the team that will be putting this together and the patient experience team that will work not only with us across the country is, so what have we done about it, and how can we articulate to our patients and the public that we've had this information back, and as a result we have done something. It picks up on some of the comments that Robert Francis was making in the earlier session, so the closing that loop so we can be really open, not only about what people are saying, but what we've done will be critical, so we can actually demonstrate improvement. And I think with the new Director of Patient Experience and the team, we'll be able to help do that.
Thanks, Tim. I think it's fantastic. But can I just be absolutely clear from the conversation, which is focused on the utility of this information for those who are delivering the services, that this information will be made available in digital format to anybody that wants it, that it's completely in the public domain for those who use the service as well as deliver it?
Yeah, it will.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's the telling point, isn't it? This is an ability to make use of information that's already there, which is ill-used at the moment, plus to supplement it, plus to develop it. But use this as a way which not only informs those who are involved in provision, in clinical care and in commissioning, but more generally setting the framework within which the NHS will work. So, Tim, there's great enthusiasm around the table for the proposal. Can I ask if the board members are happy to note the paper and to commend it?
Absolutely. It's great.
Okay, thank you very much. Tim, we move on then to, as it were, part 2, which is your proposal for building citizen and community engagement.
So again, following on from what Robert was saying, but more in a way something which has certainly occupied my thinking for really many years, and I'm sure many other people around this table, has been how we fundamentally reinvent the way in which patients and the public are engaged, involved, are able to participate in key decisions about the care they're receiving, in the planning of services, in ensuring that those services are properly held to account. And, you know, to be honest, whilst there have been some fantastic examples of local partnership and participation, there are equally examples of tokenism in the NHS, you know, which have, I think, led to a service in some cases which is genuinely non-responsive and actually is very much inward-facing and not focused on its customer, whether that's a patient or just a member of the public. So the proposal here is that we, the board approves authorises the setting up of a design group which will look at constructing something which I've called a civil society assembly, and the idea of this is to create a kind of a forum and network for anybody who wishes to engage in holding the Commissioning Board independently to account for what it's doing, and to provide the Commissioning Board with a forum, a public forum in which it can be, you know, it can learn new things about how it can improve its own level of engagement. The model for this is something I was involved in my previous role at the Cabinet Office, which was something called the Open Government Partnership. This is an extraordinary international initiative which brings together governments and civil society with equal status to promote transparency and open government around the world. And I watched how the conversation just led nations very challenged with responsiveness in very, very different directions because of the fusion of civil society and sort of governmental involvement in that space. So I believe we can achieve something similar, kind of a new conversation, but I don't want to predict what that might actually look like. So we're asking for a design group to be established that will go away and come back with proposals for a civil society assembly. The proposal is that will be entirely independent of the Commissioning Board. The Commissioning Board will fund its secretariat. Very kindly, Victor has agreed to lead the conversation, and he will pull together with Kieran's support a design group. And I imagine that design group will come from a wide range of civil society interests, so not just patient organisations, though their contribution is invaluable, but equally from others in other walks of life who have a deep and profound interest in health and care. So not Health Watch. This is about an informal organisation, thing, network, voice, multi-voice, you know, alliance, which will just help hold us to account, and I hope enrich the conversation we're having about the nature of public and patient participation.
Thank you. I mean, it is hugely ambitious if it's to succeed. and not be tokenism and not to evaporate as so many other initiatives have. You mentioned Healthwatch. How do you see this being complementary and not standing on Healthwatch territory?
Well, we need to talk to Healthwatch about that, and I've had conversations with them. They certainly need to be involved, but I see it being quite different. This is about a group of people voluntarily coming together to help the mission of the health service improve. I don't see it, it has no formal powers. It wouldn't be, unlike Healthwatch. I mean, Healthwatch, I think, is part of that dialogue, but it's about trying to broaden the conversation as widely as possible. So I think it's very much complementary to Healthwatch, and certainly, you know, I'm very much hoping they'll be involved.
Thank you. Victor, thank you for agreeing to lead on the design. Is there anything you'd like to add to Tim's introduction?
I think it is a hugely ambitious task, but I think if we're not in the realm of huge ambition, then we're in the wrong place. I think if the design of this is going to work, then we have to design it so that it attacks those people whose voices haven't been heard, i.e. those people at the sharp end of the inverse care law, and how that's going to be uncomfortable. Yeah. So, in my view, the relationship with Healthwatch is important because this is an and, it's not an either-or thing. I think we can add value to it, but I think if it's going to work, I think we need to be prepared for it to be giving us uncomfortable messages, as well as comfortable ones. Yeah. I think we have to be prepared for it to help us move the needle towards getting rid of the inverse care law, and I think we have to ask it, or it has to help us really define commissioning in the interests of the patient and the consumer.
Yes. Moira?
I was just going to ask, because obviously the conversation with Robert Francis earlier this morning emphasised the importance of the public understanding commissioning. In a sense, you would have wanted that to have happened first and then this to happen so that you could invite people who understood. Presumably the design group will think about how you engage people who at the moment don't think commissioning is anything to do with them or very interesting, or, you know, so it's a significant task. And I just think again that certainly the media doesn't have a kind of understanding of commissioning either, so how it could be portrayed as something about us ignoring Healthwatch. So I think it is very important that we talked with them, but also that we're kind of getting people in to tell us nice things rather than critical things. So it's very challenging, as both Tim and Victor have said, and it will be a bumpy journey, I would think.
Yeah, problems we don't know where the bumps are. I'm going to need all the Kieran's going to be riding shotgun on me on this. We're going to need a lot of help.
Well, thank you both, Kieran and Victor. As Victor just said, it's a bumpy ride and we don't know where the bumps are, but we hope you find them for us and help to navigate us over them. Are we happy to agree to the setting up of the design group, as is proposed in the paper, and proceed with a launch to call to participate in the Healthcare Expo in March next month? Okay? Thank you very much, Tim, for that. We move now into some quite heavy business, if I may put it like that. In other words, to understand some of the critical success factors in setting up the board and moving to our next stages. I'm going to ask Bill to introduce his paper. Bill, over to you.
Thank you, Malcolm. This is the board's regular update on the implementation of our establishment programme. It matters because the way we establish ourselves will provide the platform on which we express our values in how we work and in how we behave. So it feels a bit technical, but actually it's a really important foundation for the way we want to be in future. The report in paragraphs 30 to 37, I won't go through the detail, very happy to take questions, just summarises some of the changes that we've made to our risk assessments since we spoke last. And there are 4 positive changes in that we achieved the December recruitment target that we'd set for ourselves. We successfully made allocations to clinical commissioning groups. We've assessed an improvement in the risk around the establishment of the Operations Directorate, you know, the largest part of our organisation, the one with the widest reach, and we believe that's progressing well. And we've improved our assessment of the risk around stakeholder engagement, and that's on the back of a piece of work that the department did to check with our strategic partners how they felt we were behaving and developing our partnerships with them, and that's been a positive story. The three areas where we've signalled a greater risk than we've previously discussed. First is around dealing with parliamentary business and briefing, very important for the accountability of the service to Parliament and also therefore to the public. We've put extra effort and extra attention into that over the past month to make sure that in the area teams where a lot of the knowledge is going to lie, that we're connecting that to, you know, to a strong central process so that we can reliably get whatever information Parliament and ministers want about the health service flowing well and flowing smoothly. And since we've written this report, I think I can assure the board that we've made good progress on that. We've flagged up, as you would expect, the real basic building blocks around our estate and our corporate IT, where we've been putting a lot of attention into the contingency arrangements to ensure that the amount of time it takes to develop and spread and implement a new IT system, which is what we're doing, that will stretch well into next year. We're now getting the assurance, and we'll have it for each of our offices by the end of next week, that there are suitable arrangements in place for the start of the year. And the final point is just this big logistical challenge of moving through from the appointment of people, getting them safely onto the payroll, and it's just the magnitude of that task that we're flagging up here, and it needs absolute attention and resource over this last month before we take up all of our responsibilities. So very happy to discuss or take questions, but I'll ask the board to note the report.
Thank you. Let me invite comments from members of the board. Kieran.
My usual question, and we're recruiting people, we're just about hitting the numbers. What's the experience like? Are people arriving well?
Yeah, I was going to talk about that a bit later, but I'll raise it now. And my view is what we're showing. I was chatting to Joe Wass about this, and there's a point Joe is very keen to be made. I think we can show that our numbers are getting better, so they're improving. The people behind those numbers, I think, are feeling still pretty bruised. So it's been a drawn-out process over the last year. People have had to go through, you know, a lot of different steps to get interviewed, to come on board, and they're coming on board to an organisation which is in its set-up mode at the same time as most of them are responsible for delivering, you know, the system as it is right to the end of the year. That's a huge amount of expectation we're putting on people, and I don't think we've yet managed to give them as much support and you know, help as we would want. So yes, we're getting the numbers, you know, in place, but I think we'll have a lot of work to do, from now on, to ensure that those numbers are backed with people who've, you know, got high morale, are really understanding, you know, the values right the way through our organisation, wherever we sit, and I think that'll be a big priority for us.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill. We received the report. We're, I think, reassured by it, but we know that there are an enormous number of risks between now and the 1st of April and indeed beyond. So thank you for your team's work in taking us through that.